Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday in Houston, Texas. I'm pleased to report that we survived the storm, I think. A lot of power outage today, but most of the reports seem like it wasn't as big as expected. But speaking of things big that we've been expecting, Mike Sommers is with us today. Mike is the president and CEO of API, American Petroleum Institute. And we're just delighted to have you, Mike. Let me pause right here and say, awesome. This is really going to be fun.
Thanks, Maynard. It's great to be with you today.
Well, as Mike, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about with Mike. Maybe some of it not so fun, Mike, as some of the battles that are being fought up in Washington, D.C. But as Mike gets ready, let's jump into it today. Mike Bradley, what's on the screen? What's on your mind? What do you got?
Hey, Maynard. Yeah, it's great. I'm glad we actually survived the storm today in Houston. But, you know, one of the things we want to talk about, it's been pretty topical here, is what's going on in Europe with energy prices, particularly power prices, natural gas prices, carbon credits. And as you can see from this thing, you know, in the first, the lineup there is, you know, prices for power in the UK are up 100% year to date. Well, that would be Germany. I'm sorry. Prices in the UK are up 150%. If you look at number 3, that's going to be natural gas prices in Europe, and they're up 270%. UK nat gas prices are up 200%. Carbon credits are up 80%. And, you know, if you look at the last item, that's Rotterdam coal prices are up 98%. And this is all year to date. And so they're really feeling the squeeze. And what that means is as we move into the next slide, it's pretty interesting, the commentary, because we're going to be moving into the early November. We're going to be having a UN climate conference in Glasgow. And just kind of some of the bullet points I pulled just from Bloomberg stories today are very interesting. You can see the first one is UK energy suppliers go out of business as prices jump. You're seeing a massive amount of retailers in the UK are going out of business. Why? Because the price that they're buying or power is not capped, and the price that they're passing along consumers is capped. And so we're having a lot of bankruptcies, and there's typically resets of every 6 months or so. So we're going to start to see those prices flow through in November of this year. And as you walk down the list, you see that, you know, it says energy surge prompts U.S. governments to step in. And so, you know, you can see a lot of these things right here. What I really wanted, you know, kind of highlight was, you know, some of the stuff that, you know, was said today. You know, especially the fourth item, it says energy crunch should spur green shift, EU climate chief says. So he's saying as prices are going up dramatically, we should accelerate dramatically because this is the problem. And I think, you know, some of these things say, and I particularly like the one of the last bullet points here, is it says the one thing we cannot afford is for the social side to be opposed to the climate side. Essentially, you guys, you eat the prices. You don't worry about the climate change. You leave it up to us to basically tell you what's good. And so in the last item, whatever measure taken all have a price effect, and the art of politics will be there and ensure that the price effect doesn't affect the most vulnerable. So essentially, let us as politicians decide what's good for you guys. Don't worry about it. It's all good. You know, let's accelerate. And so, you know, as we close out this slide, the point I wanted to make is that we're going to be coming up on this UN climate in early November. There's been a lot of momentum behind it, but bottom line is, you know, one of the things we saw in 2018 with the yellow vests in France is that when prices start to go up and consumers start to see this, they start to revolt. And so it's not going to be easy sledding to get a lot of people to come on, because you're going to see energy prices in Europe, and a lot of the revenues they thought they were going to see are just not going to be there. So they're going to have to dip deeper and deeper into the coffers to really go ahead and expand these programs, and they're underspending, and the U.S. is underspending, to be quite frank. So I think as we move into early November, watch the politics and watch what the average consumer is doing out there. I think there's going to be a pushback. I think there's going to have to be people saying, you know what, let's not try to accelerate everything in the next 2, 3, or 4 years. We need to be thinking about this over the next 10 years. We need to go about it slowly. What we're seeing right now in the UK and Europe is prices exploding. And God help us right now, the market is obviously trying to basically price discovery right now. They're trying to drive prices up, kill demand, because if we go into winter and we don't have enough gas, and you have to start shutting people off in the middle of winter, there's going to be people with pitchforks out in the streets. So, just want to, lay that, out there right now. It's coming. It's interesting. And you put that on the back of what's going on in the U.S. with gas prices at $5.30 an MCF today, to give you a little bit of a, idea of what's going on in the UK. Right now, the UK is eating $21 to $22 an MCF U.S. prices equivalent. And so a lot of pain, a lot of pressure. The consumers are not seeing those prices yet because they're capped. They're going to be seeing them. There's going to be a revolt. And I think there's going to be a little bit of pushback on this climate change stuff in the months to come. So just something we wanted to highlight.
Well, that's good stuff, Mike. I mean, we always look for the subject line on when we send the blast. I don't know if we can go with pitchforks in the street. That's powerful. Let's see how the rest of today plays out, but we might have to use it. Matt Portillo, you brought Matthew Blair today, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about what you guys have been looking at in research, and we've got a conference tomorrow.
Yeah, sure, Maynard. I'll turn it over to Matthew Blair. We're really excited about rolling out some of our initial thoughts on the RNG space. The work his team has done here is a one-on-one piece, and you're going to be seeing a lot more from TPH in the RNG sector here in the not-too-distant future. Just to touch on one of the comments that Mike made, it is very topical right now. One thing we are seeing is the intersection of renewables and thermal power generation, whether you're looking at Europe or the U.S., has become an extremely important topic from a macro perspective, and the team is spending a lot of time on it. As Mike highlighted, not only are we facing relatively low storage levels in Europe from a gas perspective, but we continue to see a lot of volatility in wind generation in particular, which is causing the thermal fleet to have to run harder. That's something we've been talking about thematically in the U.S. as well, and what this also means is we'll probably see greater volatility in commodity prices moving forward, especially if the upstream industry remains very disciplined on capital. We're not going to be able to incrementally meet supply immediately as we have volatility in the wind curve and then the solar curve. So something we spend a lot of time on, something investors are very focused on. But with that, I'll turn it over to Matthew Blair to walk through some of the initial takes on RNG 101. We have our conference tomorrow. Extremely excited about it. It's part of our mini conference series, and you should see more material from us on this topic and other topics moving forward in the energy transition complex.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. We're super excited to have this RNG conference tomorrow. RNG is a really exciting and high growth area, but it's also an area that's pretty new. And so we're getting a lot of questions coming in on it. And, one of those questions, honestly, is just, hey, what is RNG? And so really it all starts with biogas. And biogas is just a naturally occurring gas that comes out of landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and then farms, right? The manure from swine farms, from dairy farms. It's important to capture this gas. It contains about 50% methane, which is a pretty potent greenhouse gas. And really, when you think of RNG, you should think of it as just an upgraded form of biogas. So RNG is about 96, 97% methane content. It's also free of all the impurities. Next question that we've been getting is, hey, what is RNG used for? And the nice thing about RNG is it's chemically equivalent to fossil fuel natural gas. So anything you use regular natural gas for, you can use RNG. But because of the structure of incentives, about 78% of RNG is used in transportation. So we're talking, vehicle fuel for CNG garbage trucks or LNG long haul trucking. Next question is, what does the margin profile look like for RNG? And because it is heavily dependent on government subsidies, there's a couple of big moving parts here. So first, on the revenue side, we start with, just regular natural gas pricing. So call that $5 an M. RNG can also qualify for a D3 RIN. That's currently worth about $33 an M. And then RNG can also qualify for a California low carbon fuel standard credit for landfill gas that is converted to RNG. That's worth about $10 an M. But for dairy manure that's converted to RNG, it's currently worth about 75 an M. Then you would take off, a royalty to the gas owner, as well as just some O&M expenses, and it all shakes out to landfill gas is currently getting about $35 an M. Dairy RNG is getting about $85 an M. So there's a big rush of investment into this space. And then finally, last question is, who are the major players in this space? And it's kind of a mix. There's some pure play companies like Montauk and Archaea. There's also some waste management companies like WM and Republic Services. One nice thing about this industry is that the ownership is pretty diffuse right now. The top 8 players only control about 65% of US capacity. So we think that's going to open the door for some consolidation down the road. So overall, we're super excited to jump into this. And once again, we really look forward to our conference tomorrow. So I can turn back to you, Maynard.
Well, look, that's fantastic, guys. Thanks for the lead in. You've definitely gotten our juices flowing for a conversation with Mike Sommers. Mike, again, it's so great to have you. There's so much we could talk about. I guess one lead in, Mike, I think what you've been doing over the last 2-3 weeks, showing us disruption, particularly what's coming out of Europe. And obviously the research guys, it's great the way you're pointing us to the new things and how things are changing. But it looks, Mike, when you look at that, it looks very inflationary. It looks very erratic. With Glasgow, it also gets filled with like rhetoric. I'm kind of building a taco here. I've got an inflation. I've got an erratic inflationary taco, and the taco is made of rhetoric. What do you look at that and think? What's on your mind? I know you're seeing so many people every day, industry, Washington, but let me just ask you how you're thinking about the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you've put that taco together, and I think one of the things I think everybody needs to realize is that as we look at these policy options that policymakers are going through right now, all of that is on their mind. It's not like these things occur in a vacuum. Of course, there's ideologies that are brought to the fore, but everyone is looking at the political environment, the social environment, the economic environment that we find ourselves in, as we're taking on these big policy issues. And you think about where we stand right now, from a policy perspective. President Biden is trying to get a lot done in his first year in office. And that's similar to how other presidents have responded during their first years in office. Most presidents anymore, they basically get about a 2-year period to get big stuff done, because that's usually when they have control, their party has control of the House and the Senate. So most presidents try to forego big bipartisan accomplishments in their first 2 years and try to get everything done in that 2-year period. And what you're seeing right now is this, incredible agenda that's all being put together, in your terminology, into this taco. And people really just don't know what the ramifications are going to be. And inflation, based on, we do a lot of public polling here at API, inflation is the number one issue that concerns the American people right now. And with all the spending that's going out the door between the COVID response, in addition to that, this bipartisan infrastructure bill that will likely get done at some point soon, and then potentially another $3 trillion plus piled onto the American economy, Americans are starting to get really worried about what that means for their pocketbook and what it means particularly for inflationary concerns.
Well, Mike, let's maybe take a step back. We kind of jumped right into the taco there. I don't know if that analogy is going to hold. Usually Colin is our analogy guy. But do you mind taking a step back and just tell us about the API? And I know you joined in the summer of 2018, I think it was. Why'd you join? How'd you find it at that time? And then how has it kind of changed? These last 3-ish years have been, pretty dramatic in all the various things that have been going on. Maybe just tell us, what does API today look like? With a little history? Absolutely.
So look, as many of your viewers know, API has been around for over 100 years. It was really started as an organization that really was meant to be the standard setting organization for the worldwide oil and gas industry. It's evolved over time. And while we started as a standards organization, we've evolved as a standards and advocacy organization. So we spent a lot of our time working on behalf of the nearly 600 API member companies to advance the oil and gas industry in the United States. Your viewers are very familiar with who my members are. Everyone from Exxon and Chevron to Cabot to Devon, but we also have a significant portion of the refining community as well, not just within Exxon and Chevron and BP and Shell, but also Marathon Petroleum and Phillips 66. So we really do represent the full range of the oil and gas industry in the United States. And at our core, we are still a standards setting body. Our Global Industry Services division has about 700 standards on many of the issues that your viewers care about. And all of those standards are about health, environment, and safety. And that's really the core of what API does. But in addition to that, we have this advocacy arm that works with our members to develop policies and then advance those policies on Capitol Hill and in the states. In addition to our headquarters here in Washington, D.C., we have 8 regional offices as well throughout the United States that help advance these priorities at the state level and the local level as well. Because as you know, a lot of these big battles are occurring at the state and local level, not just in Washington, D.C., and we have to be ready to fight those battles where they are. So that's really what API is. We work hard on behalf of our members, and this is a really critical time for our industry, particularly in Washington, D.C., as they start to develop these new policies that we're going to be dealing with for many, many years ahead. As for me, I spent most of my career here in Washington, working in government, both for President Bush, and then I ended my career in government as the chief of staff to the Speaker of the House, a guy by the name of John Boehner, who I worked for on and off for about 20 years. And then when he left the speakership, I ran a trade association in the financial services space, and then was recruited into API a little more than 3 years ago. And to me, it was a no-brainer. API is a very well-respected organization here in Washington. I think it's the most important trade association in town, because if it weren't for what our industry does, no other association could be successful. Providing affordable, reliable, and cleaner fuel is what the world needs to keep going. And so to me, API was a great logical step, and we have incredible members and an incredible group of CEOs that represent those members on our board.
Mike, this weekend was obviously a really tough weekend for the country, thinking back on the anniversary of 9/11, but I was really struck by, I think it was a New York Times sort of article / editorial that said, God, we really missed it. We should have come out of 9/11 and invested in renewables so that we could be independent of the Mideast, so that we would not have these, this was a whole piece. And, again, one of these really clever, highly educated people. And I was thinking to myself, wow, we did that, except we obviously did it with shale. Why has the American miracle just been glossed over in Washington, D.C.? Why are they racing to the next crisis instead of embracing what we have? I think we're so frustrated that that this particular talking point, people don't seem to understand.
Yeah, well, we certainly haven't forgotten it here at API. It's a core of the message that we like to talk to lawmakers about. But you're absolutely right. I mean, when I first came to Washington in 1996, it was really just a question of scarcity. It was a question of, where are we going to get that next barrel for American consumers? And, it was really that way even when I worked at the National Economic Council for President George W. Bush, where we were talking about, how do we grow our way out of this crisis? Cellulosic ethanol, investing in renewable fuels that we were going to grow. And then just a few short years after that was when the shale revolution really started. And you think about where we are today compared to where we were just a few short years ago, where we are the ones that are choosing our destiny from an energy perspective, and we're not dependent on these overseas actors, many of who are hostile to American interests. So it's a revolutionary story. It's a technological story as well, because this industry invests so much in the technology that we use currently in our operations. And I wish that we could take every lawmaker to see exactly what that revolution has meant for the American people. Think about it. Yeah, it's been great for jobs. About 11 million jobs, based on our most recent survey, depend on oil and gas in the United States. About 8% of American GDP. We like to say here at API that it's the first 8%, because if it weren't for that GDP that this industry provides, this economy just would not move. But in addition to that, it has meant an incredible thing for American consumers as well. You think about the fact that we've been able to really keep prices relatively stable during these really incredible times. It's because of American producers operating in the United States. And by the way, most Americans take a lot of pride in that. And that's certainly a basis upon which we do a lot of our advocacy here in Washington, D.C.
So one question, Mike, and I think Matt's going to jump here next, but are you finding when you're calling Congress people or people of influence, decision makers, et cetera, when you're calling and saying, hey, can I swing by and share some thoughts with you? Is the current trend for people to take more meetings with you? Or is the current trend to less because that flavor is no longer popular? Like what's the trend? Because I think we're hopeful that people are watching, whether it's California or what happened in Texas or what seems to be happening in Europe, that lawmakers are looking at this going, oh, hey, whoa, I'll get voted out if I steer us right into that storm. But let me ask you.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think, part of the problem that we're dealing with right now is just things are moving so very fast. I mean, you think about some of the bill that was just in the House Energy and Commerce Committee that's being reported out either today or tomorrow. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of new investment and new fees, new taxes on the American people and on the oil and gas industry. And they've spent 2 days on that package. No congressional hearings, no input whatsoever, no analysis that we can see. It's just a mad rush to the exits to get this thing out the door as quickly as possible. This is not how our democracy is supposed to work. One of the great things about API is that we are, as I believe, the most important association in town. But in addition to that, we're one of the most bipartisan as well. I have Republicans and Democrats and independents, working here at the organization, and our support spans that ideological spectrum as well. So, of course, we have a lot of people that represent the oil and gas industry, Republicans and Democrats, and we rely on them. And by the way, that map has expanded significantly, in the last 10 years because of that shale revolution. So, historically Democratic states like the state of Pennsylvania, we have a lot of great supporters there. We have great support in Ohio and New Mexico and, of course, Texas and Oklahoma and, other big production states, North Dakota. So, we have, a lot of support throughout the United States Congress. That's just not limited, as, many of your viewers may think, to a state like Texas, which is still our number one energy state. So we've been able to expand that footprint. But in addition to that, we work with other coalitions who understand the importance of affordable and reliable energy. So there are a lot of, non-traditional allies that support this industry, union members in particular, who work on our pipelines or work in our refineries are great allies to our industry. And we're continuing to work to build those allies. So no doors have been closed. I think they've only been opened, but it's been because of a lot of hard work and because the industry has grown so much in the United States.
Mike, just maybe picking up on a discussion around foreign oil production, the Biden presidency recently called on OPEC to potentially increase production to tamp down on commodity prices, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of roadblocks thrown up over the last few years around oil and gas development. how does the organization think about that, and how do you potentially approach finding a solution where cleaner oil and gas production in the U.S. can actually benefit U.S. citizens, as well as maybe meeting some of the future demand growth, which we still expect to occur over the next decade or so?
Yeah, great question. Look, we were very disappointed with President Biden asking OPEC to produce more, when this administration really in the first days of office did the opposite in the United States. Of course, cutting back on production on federal lands and in federal waters with their leasing ban. By the way, we've been waiting for this interim report for months now on what they were going to do on this leasing ban that has been going on, and it's only because of a federal judge that they've begun lease sales again. I expected that in the depths of the August congressional recess that we'd finally see that report, but we're still waiting. So I think we're very concerned about their approach, which seems to us to be just an import more oil policy. Demand for these products, as you all know better than anyone, isn't going anywhere. The real question for policymakers is whether we're going to develop our own resources or whether we're going to get them from overseas. And I think, our preference, and I think it's the preference of the American people as well, is that we get those resources from here in the United States. That's what all of our polling suggests. That's what all of our focus groups suggest. And it is a message, by the way, that resonates with lawmakers as well. So, we're going to work with this administration when we can. We're going to oppose them when we must. But some of those steps that they've taken just in the first few days of this administration were tough, I think, for most people to understand.
And maybe just a follow-up question. In terms of the ancillary businesses that have built up around shale growth and all of the benefits we've seen, how relevant is that in the broader conversation with politicians and Washington in general? Obviously, I think consumers generally think of crude oil and they think of gasoline demand, and the market's a little bit more fungible. But obviously, we've built up a significant amount of capacity in the U.S. around petchem demand, which can be driven by ethane and propane and associated commodities that are produced from shale. So just curious the knock-on effect of other industries that are vitally important, where we don't really have a substitution at the moment to replace that demand stream in the near term. And if we ultimately end up cutting off shale production growth over the next decade or so, we then have to look for foreign supplies of those products.
Yeah, another great point. We work a lot with those organizations that represent those industries as well. Many of my member companies also, participate, particularly on those big issues in that big industry. So we work closely with them to advance our joint industries. You think about the jobs that have been created. For example, right there, on the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania, right along the Ohio River, because of the Shell ethane cracker that is, 100% union labor, and will, once it comes online, is going to continue to support, hundreds and hundreds of jobs. So we spent a lot of time, talking about those industries as well that have seen this benefit of inexpensive natural gas in particular. So we work a lot with manufacturers, on some of the bills that are coming out. We are projecting a pretty significant increase in natural gas prices. And that really starts concerning manufacturers in particular who, have relied on inexpensive natural gas because of this boom in American production. And by the way, it's not lost on anybody what the environmental benefit has been of that as well. The fuel switch from coal to natural gas is the key reason why the United States is annually able to cut our GHG emissions. So we're going to continue to work to educate folks because this is about jobs ultimately. We like to say around here that, there are really two things that we need to communicate on. And first of all, the first one is the wallet, right? People don't want to pay more. The second one is the flag. Most Americans have taken great pride in the American energy revolution that started 10 years ago. And they don't want to go back to the days of being reliant on other countries. So if you put those two things together, wallet and flag, I think we have a winning message, to continue to succeed in Washington and to advance this industry.
And maybe the last question, just as a follow-up on the international versus domestic production, how is that viewed from a congressional perspective? Our research team has, over the past decade plus, spent a lot of time in the international markets, and at least just from an observational perspective, production is not nearly as clean. The environmental impact feels like in some countries, obviously not universal, but in some countries, more profound. And there's a lot less regulation that occurs within a lot of these regions versus the U.S., where we really ramped, I think, our desire to monitor emissions, focus on some of the impacts from an ESG perspective, and really clean up our production in a significant way that has potentially changed the outlook of the industry. So just curious how Congress thinks about that. Is it bifurcated, or is it painted with one broad stroke brush?
Yeah, I do think that's one of the things that we try to communicate with on a lot, which is, as I mentioned earlier, demand's not going anywhere. This is just a question of where it comes from. And a very effective way to talk to lawmakers about this is you want it to come from the United States, where it's produced cleaner under strict regulatory guidance, and with folks that have a financial incentive, by the way. And I don't want to, I do think capitalism is a key part of this as well, a financial incentive to have a clean production as well. Part of my job is I get to go to a lot of these places. I get to visit well sites, and I get to monitor their operations. It is incredible when you go to these operations, as you all know, because I know you do it a lot. How the footprint continues to shrink, and how their monitoring is incredible. Just in the 3 years that I've been at API, the evolution's been amazing. We actually have a program here at API called the Environmental Partnership, which we just put out our annual report just last week. And the Environmental Partnership is all about how do you raise the floor in terms of environmental standards, particularly as it relates to methane. And so the whole concept here is it's information sharing, it's technology sharing. So large producers, small producers come together to talk about what are innovations for how do you continue to reduce your methane emissions. We've seen tremendous results in the 4 years that this program has been going. In fact, this year, we've actually seen flare volumes down 50%. In our member participating companies in the Environmental Partnership. We can do a lot to continue to improve our environmental footprint because we have the financial incentive to do it, and we have the resources to do it as well. I worry, as I said, demand's not going anywhere. We need to make sure that we're continuing to do this in the United States because of those environmental standards and our focus on continuing to improve in our operations.
So, Mike, do you think there's a bit of an unholy alliance that could come together, which is regardless of the flavor of energy, it seems like American energy is a better choice. So if it's American oil and gas, it's better than many of the other places that you could get oil and gas. If it was American produced solar, wind, solar panels, wind blades, et cetera, the practices that we'll use to produce that will be better than a lot of the practices used around the world. Is there a way in which American energy, domestic energy starts to come together? Because they're similar issues. Like both sides of the house do it better than it's done in the rest of the world, generally speaking. Is that something that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have actually a great relationship with my counterpart at the American Clean Power Association. We interestingly share a number of members, and she recognizes the importance of natural gas in particular because of the reliability concerns that exist within solar and wind. So, we disagree a lot, but there's a lot that we can agree on too. And I think there is coalition out there for American energy. Of course, there's that old expression, I'm for all of the above energy. That I think, it was President Obama who actually started that term originally. But, we like to say that all of the above can't, exclude all of the below. We need to continue to invest in American resources to ensure that important reliability, even as there are more renewables that come into the power market. So I do think that there's a way to do that. They have, some of these renewables also have a key vulnerability. As you mentioned, a lot of them are made in areas, China in particular, that, most politicians really don't want to be working closely with China right now. So if you could insource a number of those jobs, you can continue to rely on natural gas in particular to back them up. I think there could be, a real surge in support for American energy. That's certainly something that we would love to pursue.
So you mentioned all the great benefits we've had from shale gas replacing coal, and as a result, we've actually meaningfully, one of the few places on the planet, really changed our greenhouse gas profile as a nation. Why do you think in the climate debate we're not simply sitting back and saying, where is the coal around the world? And in particular, where are the places where they're burning it less cleanly? Mm-hmm. Why don't we go after the low-hanging fruit as a global community instead of, moving to the pie in the sky challenges, and instead of just, can you tell, is there any momentum for just being a little more practical as we're trying to improve the planet's emissions?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because, what we should really be going for is cutting the most emissions at the lowest possible cost. And unfortunately, the way that policymakers looking at this is a lot of these pie in the sky approaches that probably aren't going to work and seem to come at the highest possible cost. I mean, you think about some of the things, for example, that Congress is considering today. In one of the bills that it's advancing in Congress right now is what's been referred to as a clean electricity standard, or they're changing the name as we speak. Now it's a clean energy performance program. But the whole idea here is that every year they want to pay utilities to stop using coal and natural gas and get them to rely more on solar and wind. That's at the core what this is. They want to pay them to do this, and they want to impose penalties if they don't do it. One thing in the presentation that you made at the beginning of this conversation, it was all about increased consumer costs. And we know that, consumers want to continue to have, inexpensive energy. And we also know that, they don't want to be worried about where that energy is going to come from. They want to be able to turn on the lights, and they want the lights to come on. So, and those are, I think, two key issues that just have not been addressed by this Congress yet, even as they're proposing these sweeping new proposals with, no hearing, no process whatsoever. No one has any idea what it's going to do to reliability and affordability. I think the American people have to look up right now and say, what are you going to do to my wallet in terms of increased prices, and what are you going to be doing about reliability? We've seen examples of this. So you just talked about them at the beginning of this in Europe and in California, and in some cases in Texas. We've got to get this right. The American people will not tolerate it if we don't get it right. And the lack of analysis, the lack of economic input on this process so far, I think should be very alarming to the American people. So we're trying to fill that bucket up with all of the analysis that we're putting out there, but other people are as well. Another organization here in town called the American Gas Association, which is a group that represents gas utilities, they've just put economic numbers on this clean energy performance plan, the new clean energy standard. They project could actually increase prices by 10 to 40% for American consumers. Americans aren't going to tolerate that. We saw the Yellow Vest rebellion, as you mentioned. Americans are not going to tolerate that kind of increase if that's what comes from these kinds of plans. But nobody's hearing that because there's no hearings. This process is being completely done in the dark. And we need to start demanding answers from our lawmakers.
So can I just ask, and Mike and Matt are going to jump in here, but this comment, cutting emissions at the lowest possible cost so that we can cut the most emissions. Why? I think a lot of us, we keep wondering, why has you said economic analysis, cost benefit analysis, using your resources wisely? Why have we? I mean, Washington has always spent too much. This is not a new disease, but why have we suddenly decided it just doesn't matter anymore? Can you tell, like trillions? Like, we're just not even talking about the debt like we should. Like, what is there a chance we could toggle this back, Mike, that people will remember that there's not a limitless pool of money?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a huge concern. I mean, you look at the size and the scope of the package that they're currently considering, and I don't think it'll ultimately be $3.5 trillion. I do think there are reasonable people that are standing up and saying we just can't continue to operate this way. We can't continue to spend this money that we're not going to pay for. It's our kids that are going to end up paying for this. So I do think people are starting to rise up and say, that is just way too much money to spend in a package like this. Unfortunately, Maynard, I think one of the biggest concerns that we have is that this is no longer about, advancing a particular policy. It's about advancing ideology. And the United States has become so politically divided that that space in the middle for reasonable and rational solutions has gotten smaller as well. And I think, moderate members from both sides of the aisle need to come together and talk about some of these pragmatic solutions, not ideological based solutions we need to be talking about solutions that actually have the analysis, have the cost benefit of analysis in particular. And again, focused on how do we do this at the lowest possible cost for the most bang for the buck. The Environmental Partnership, the API sponsored program, is a great example of that. We've been able to cut emissions, methane emissions in particular, which there's a lot of concern about right now, because of a voluntary program where many API members and non-API members have come together to figure out those lowest possible solutions. And it's an exciting advance for the industry, but we want to work with government to continue to make those advancements. And unfortunately, because the United States seems like it's going swinging back and forth between, one ideology to the other, and then they feel like they have to get everything done in this first 2-year period of a presidency. Mm-hmm. Some of those bipartisan solutions just haven't come together. But we're optimistic that we'll continue to work with lawmakers to advance those. And if not, we have to stand up and say this is not the right thing for the American people.
Mike, maybe on that theme, is there somewhere in the middle to meet from a policy perspective? So again, as we look at the renewable complex, on standalone wind or standalone solar, it is very cost competitive on a power generation basis, but then intermittency becomes a bigger issue. And we do spend a lot of time as a team looking at the battery market. We're just not there from a utility scale perspective yet to make it fully cost competitive. But it does look like we have solutions on the horizon that may change that dynamic over the medium to longer term. But as you mentioned, we're rushing to the exits to shut down thermal capacity as quickly as possible. So one topic that's come up pretty frequently has been carbon capture, CCS, blue gas, the ability for the industry to continue to clean up the commodity stream and provide reliable, cheap energy with incremental investment that can scale midstream infrastructure and build out a whole new subsector within the U.S. Just curious, do you think there's going to be further policy support on that front? Because there does seem to be a tremendous amount of captive capital waiting on the sidelines, but really needs to see line of sight to policy support and a little bit of elongation of that policy to support to move some of these projects forward.
Yeah. Great question. API in March, we actually endorsed a new plan here called our Climate Action Framework. The Climate Action Framework is all about advancing these technologies and these ways that to advance our energy systems. So the framework itself can be found at api.org/climate, but it's really 5 key components make up the Climate Action Framework. A lot of it is really investing in these new technologies, CCUS in particular, which we think could be a real game changer for our industry and for our climate. We're doing a lot of that investment ourselves. Our member companies are investing in CCUS every single day, and new commitments are coming every single day. For example, Chevron just announced a big investment in CCUS technology just today. So we're seeing a lot of this investment from API member companies and from the industry. Because they know how important investing in the next technology is. Hydrogen is another place where there's a lot of investment, more investment from our industry than just about any other industry in the entire world. And we'll continue to do that because our member companies are all about problem solving, and they know that the next problem is going to be where the energy is going to come from. And we know it has to be produced cleaner, but we also know that this industry is going to be right there doing the research, doing the R&D to make sure that we have those energy systems in place. But the other thing that the Climate Action Framework addresses is what are the things that the government can do to continue to advance this. API, for the first time, it endorsed, for example, a price on carbon, which we believe provides the market signals that are necessary to make these investments economic. We're talking with lawmakers about that right now. And unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like they're interested in a free market-based approach, but they're more interested in a command and control approach, which is what the Clean Energy Standard is built upon. So we're going to continue to advance these efforts. The Climate Action Framework is also about commitments that the industry is going to make in terms of emission reductions as well. So, I commend your attention to api.org/climate if you're interested in learning more about API's Climate Action Framework.
Well, since you referenced it, Mike, I think we might attach it. We'll attach the link to the whole site, but also in particular that. Is there, I know your organization, you're doing a lot of analytical work. And you have a really deep bench of people, and you're connected to a lot of other organizations. And if there's ever anything our research organization can do, we'd love to help or compare notes. But do you mind just telling us a little bit about the bench strength at API?
Absolutely. So at API, we have a very strong policy development process that is really built upon our members' policy expertise. So we have committees on all the big segments that we represent: upstream, downstream, midstream, and natural gas markets that help inform our policymaking decisions. But we also have an economics department as well, led by two great economists, David Shin and Dean Foreman, who spend a lot of time looking at energy markets. And in addition to that, we also provide the weekly and the monthly statistical outlook, where we're surveying our member companies in terms of what they're seeing in the energy industry marketplace. So we provide a lot of information into the marketplace to help inform investors and, of course, to help inform the industry as they're making big decisions. So we have, a lot of these resources in-house. But, it won't surprise you that we don't have all of it in-house. So oftentimes we're going out to other research firms like your firm and others to help us do some of this analysis, as well as some of these big policies come to the fore, so that we can help advance the industry through smart, independent, academically rigorous research that we both do internally and externally as well, as we work with other consulting firms.
Hey, Mike, it strikes me as interesting that everyone talks about the shale revolution. It's been fantastic, but a lot of that was done on the back of debt and a lot of companies going bankrupt. And a lot of it was for the benefit of the consumer. I mean, we really benefited. And the theme we're seeing now in the industry is like, we need returns. We're going after return of capital. We're going to go after share buybacks, variable dividends, stuff of that nature. And what worries me is when we see the one little thing, price goes up and all of a sudden Congress is saying, the refiners are in collusion. These guys are doing that. How do you think that backdrop of companies saying we now have to make money against also the backdrop of, hey, we want you to go to renewables, and a lot of the guys that are in renewables right now are saying the returns are just subpar. There's really barely above the cost of capital. How do you think that plays out? And, not only from an industry standpoint, but just Washington looking at these guys saying, these guys are doing the wrong things. They should be producing. They shouldn't be buying stock back, et cetera, because that's where we are right now. And it seems like there's going to be a lot of tension between both in the year to come.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of collective amnesia that goes on in Washington policymaking. I feel like I often have to remind folks of of the terrible oil market that we saw in that terrible 2020 COVID year. People at some point, people have to actually start to make money again. You think about just in broad terms how the world consumes every single day 100 million barrels of oil on average. Even during that weird COVID period, in the worst, deepest part of the pandemic, the world was still consuming 81 million barrels of oil every single day. So, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We basically shut the entire world economy down, the entire developed world economy down, and we were still using 80 million barrels of oil every single day. So, I do think you raise great points on these market dynamics, but I would rather our industry I think consumers would prefer that it's markets that are driving these decisions, not policymakers. We're a free market organization. It's our one of our top principles is that we're for free markets and free trade. And so even in the worst parts of that pandemic, you didn't see our industry asking for bailouts. In fact, we were fighting bailouts. We're as an industry, we rely on markets, and as American consumers' preferences change, our member companies are going to meet those market dynamics, whether it's for more renewables, more reliable, more affordable energy. But again, it's markets and people that should be making those decisions, not bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.
The last question I have is, given all these things going forward, what do you see you guys looking like in 5 or 6, 7 years? Or who are the members that are going to be in your coalition in the next 5 years, and maybe other coalitions in Washington, D.C.? What does API look like? Is it clean energy in there? What does it look like 5, 6, 7 years from now?
Yeah, you guys know this better than I do. You look at what demand is going to be going forward. I think if I was a betting man, I think we're going to be using more oil and gas in the future, not less. And that's certainly based on all of our economic research, and it's just based on numbers, right? The world's going to grow by 2 billion people, by 2050. IEA says that we're going to increase energy demand by 50% by 2050. Where's that power going to come from? And IEA believes that almost 50% of that is going to continue to come from oil and gas. So I think API is going to be around for another 100 years. I'm confident that the world's going to continue to demand these products, and our challenge is to continue to meet consumer demand. And consumer demand, from what we've seen, is going to continue to be for affordable energy that is reliable, that comes on when you flip that switch, but they're also demanding that it be cleaner. And this industry consistently steps up to the plate to meet all three of those questions: more affordable, more reliable, and cleaner. And so I think API has a great future. We have an incredible past, but we're going to be around for a long time because this industry is going to be around for a long time.
I find the reliability, for whatever reason, why reliability doesn't get a seat at the table when things are evaluated. It'd be like if I said, I love Mike, he's one of our best employees. I never know when he's going to be available to actually work, but he's great. Other than that, okay, just a little Mike Bradley humor there. Well, Mike, we started, Bradley had us with pitchforks in the street, but you got us to wallet and flag. And I think that's what we're going to use as our subject line today. It was great. What can the rest of us do to help you, to help this debate? Give us any guidance or any requests you have. We're happy to help.
Well, first of all, TPH is an incredible research firm. We rely on your data. We rely on your insights. So thank you for everything that you do for our great industry. We're going to continue to rely on it, and I look forward to working with you. But I'll tell you the second thing is, I spent a lot of time with lawmakers. I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. I spent a lot of time working with lawmakers to advance our industry and to advance smart policy. But the best lobbyists that I know are the constituents of these members of Congress. And, you need to be working with your member of Congress to advance our great industry. And folks need to tell them, what they think, because that the opposition to this industry isn't taking a break. I certainly see it on my Twitter feed. We need to make sure that our voice is being heard. We can do it at API, but the fact of the matter is that we need, constituents of members of Congress telling them, what policies to advance in this critical time.
Oh, that's a great place to end. We appreciate you doing everything you can to make sure people are thinking through all the issues and making good choices on behalf of all of us. So it's really great to spend time with you, Mike. It looked like a setup. You were so nice about TPH. Everybody's, like, holy smokes, that's worth its weight in gold. So we certainly appreciate your comments there.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be with you all again. And I look forward to doing it again at some point soon.
Yeah, come see us in Houston. Thanks, Mike.
Will do. Thanks, Maynard.